Star Wars 7x7, episode 2737. Now that I've had a chance to sit with the first chapter of the Book of Boba Fett for a few hours, it occurs to me that season 1 of the series may actually have much smaller stakes than we might have initially thought. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. So, as I've been sitting with this first chapter of the Book of Boba Fett, Stranger in a Strange Land, right? One of the things that kept coming back to me was the Hollywood Reporter story that came out earlier this month, and one of the quotes that Robert Rodriguez had about the stuff we've been able to see so far prior to the release of the episode, that it was just these, very sort of limited situations and little bits and pieces more of those limited situations, and that it was a very intentional decision because, according to Robert Rodriguez, they couldn't show anything from the second half of the first episode because it gave too much away, quote unquote. And later on in the article, he says things turn up that you don't expect and that they got to do things that they couldn't believe they got to do and that every episode has big surprises. Now, in thinking about the actual first episode that we got, really the only thing in the episode that seems to qualify for that is the fight scene in flashback time where Boba and the Rodian and the Tusken child encounter that enormous crazy sand monster situation. So sure, they didn't want to give that away necessarily, but I guess when I hear like, oh, there's stuff we don't want to give away, that didn't necessarily qualify for me for all intents and purposes. It seemed more like current timeline, storyline sort of things where there was going to be a surprise, a plot twist or something like that that they might have thrown at us. So it just didn't seem like it necessarily fit the thinking that I had initially had based on those statements. But Dave Filoni is also quoted in the same Hollywood Reporter piece, and he talks about how in The Mandalorian, that's a comparatively new situation and setting and whatnot. And so the stuff that you see in there is very brand new. Bo-Katan, of course, notwithstanding. But by contrast, the Book of Boba Fett allows them to connect with both things that we know and things that we don't know. And so it does suggest that we are going to see other characters and references to other situations coming in that are connected to things that we already know in Star Wars storytelling. So that also seems to lean toward the idea of it being a little bit of a smaller world for season 1, and I suppose it suggests that they may have bigger ideas about where the series goes once we're done with season 1, and maybe things will get bigger. But I do have some other thoughts about why the stakes might be smaller than we might have thought or imagined based on the stuff we've been hearing so far. First of all, the runtime. So it was 34 minutes, and that's, with the credits, so a little bit less than that. And it felt like, I didn't time it out for sure, but it felt like it was pretty evenly divided between flashback time and current storyline. So if that continues to be the case, then we're really only talking about 2 hours worth of storytelling time for the current period. That's not a lot of time to do a heck of a lot in the Book of Boba Fett storytelling for this season. And related to that is the positioning of the conflict for this first episode. So basically we have the mayor's majordomo showing up and saying, nope, not giving you any tribute, and then assassins showing up and trying to kill Boba and Fennec. So we haven't had any confrontation with the mayor yet. It seems like that's going to be coming in episode 2. And it's kind of hard to imagine a world where Boba shows up in the mayor's inner sanctum and he says, yeah, I'm the crime lord now. And the mayor goes, dope, okay, you're the crime lord now, and that's it. I mean, it's not going to work that way. The mayor's not going to be so easily convinced. That means that this is going to continue on, and so it seems like they're setting up the mayor as the main antagonist for Boba for season 1. Another thing that I think augurs for a smaller stakes season has to do with Boba Fett's health. So we talked about this yesterday in the breakdown of takeaways from the first chapter, but the fact that he had to specifically say to his Gamorrean guards, get me to the bacta pod while he was laying on the streets of Mos Espa, I mean, that seems like it was pretty urgent of a situation. And yes, I know he took a bunch of electrostaff hits and so forth, so certainly I'm not trying to minimize the damage that he went through in that fight. But he was spending time in that pod even before he got into a fight. And this also seems to be the means by which we're getting into the flashback situations. Like when he's in the tank, that's when we flash back to his previous time where he had just gotten out of the Sarlacc and was adjusting to life as a Tusken prisoner. I think there's more for us to learn about his health situation and why he has to be in that pod as often as he does. So yeah, that feels like a secondary kind of plot situation that will need to be resolved. Another reason why it seems the stakes are going to be a lot smaller is because of where the tributes were coming from. So basically, all the people who are giving Boba Fett money are from in and around Mos Espa, and that's a lot smaller than what the territory was that Jabba the Hutt ruled over. We still don't know what the situation is with the Hutt clans. Apparently they couldn't decide on leadership after the events of Return of the Jedi, and that lasted at least through 5 ABY, but you figure that they had to get their act together at some point. We just don't know what that looks like. And in the meantime, Bib Fortuna has been working Tatooine, but maybe it's the case that he was only able to handle Tatooine and maybe even less than Tatooine, maybe just Mos Espa. I mean, there are references in the marketing materials about this, about Tatooine having a new crime lord, so maybe Bib Fortuna's influence ranged beyond Mos Espa, but it's kind of hard to feel that right now. It really does feel like it's a lot smaller territory that Boba Fett is in charge of now, and unless we start hearing from Hutt clans, yeah, and the fact that it's a mayor and that is his main antagonist at this point, yeah, it does seem like, again, lower stakes comparatively because it's a smaller territory, much smaller. And the last reason that jumped out at me has to do with a line that did not appear in the first episode, which is in one of the commercials. There's a line from Fennec Shand where she says, "These are just the first wave, they're going to war," and Boba Fett replies by saying, "Then we'll be ready." So that particular sentence construction doesn't make sense coming in episode 2 and referring to the Nightwind assassin attack in episode 1. In other words, she is going to be talking about another attack entirely, and that there's going to be some all-out war that Boba Fett has to be ready for. We also didn't see the dinner party in this first episode, and so it occurs to me that Boba Fett is going to have to raise an army to be able to fight whatever army is coming at him. I mean, certainly if he couldn't handle 6 of these Nightwind assassins with Boba or with Fennec Shand at his side, and he needed the help of the 2 Gamorrean guards to do it, then Boba has definitely lost a step over the years. It's not like fighting Imperial stormtroopers, right? So part of the season is going to have to be dealing with multiple attacks that are probably being driven by the mayor. And also that does lead to the possibility of a big reveal at the end of the season, because the mayor probably reports up a chain to someone else. And so the question is, who is that someone else? And that someone else is probably going to be a big bad for season 2. But for season 1, it looks like Boba Fett already has his work cut out for him just to hang on to the Mos Espa territory alone. And so there you go. Those are the reasons why I think the stakes for season 1 of the Book of Boba Fett are going to be much smaller than we initially thought they might be, and that is going to do it for this episode of the show. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it, as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.